Hey, everybody. We'll give folks a few minutes to hop on and we'll get started. So
Should
yeah,
take it.
Pink, we were just talking about before we get rolling here, the 23andMe um, had a security incident. I think 14,000 users, from what I understand, were compromised because they were reusing credentials. So essentially, the attackers got a username and password from Dehashed or Have I Been Pwned and used those credentials to get into these affected users, 14,000, mind you, affected users, 23andMe profile, and then they could access all their data as well.
Yeah, and so it was 14,000 unique accounts, and then you were saying
Hmm.
too, like if they linked the family, like family
Right.
sharing type thing, so it could have been
Hmm.
even more than that, I guess technically.
Yeah, I think through the 14,000, I don't know how many they were. Let's see. They gained access to information on 5.5 million DNA relative profiles. So, like, if you turn
Wow.
on like the DNA linking automatically, I guess, it populates your family, those people you're related to, it's part of your profile. So they could get into the account and then see the information from their family members as well.
That's impressive.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I don't have my data on there. Mainly, I was worried that
Yeah.
my DNA would be very valuable to perhaps create an army of clones.
Yeah, that
Um,
was my,
you
my
know,
thoughts on it. Yeah. Yeah, that's why I never spit in the tube or whatever, man. Yeah, no, I don't want clone pinkies out there.
right? I
I
mean,
mean,
that's
unless they're
scary.
mine.
If there's a million Minxie mains coming at you, like,
Right, yeah.
so
Squeak.
I don't want to be a weapon of mass destruction. So I'll keep my DNA off of there.
Oh man. Yep, good job,
Yeah,
Rob. Perfect
yeah.
open. Yep.
All right, cool. You ready to roll, man? Let's dig right
Let's
in.
do it. Oh, we might need to acknowledge we don't have a friend.
Yeah, so Eric's not joining us today, unfortunately. Had to take a little time off, and so hopefully he's relaxing today and getting some R&R.
Yeah.
So, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Hackle Box. Joined as always by myself, Oscar Minks, and the always wonderful Pinky Thompson. Pinky, how you doing today?
Good man. Good. How you doing?
Doing good, man. Doing good. It's Friday. I'm doing good right now.
Yeah.
It is Friday. It's almost the weekend. But I'm a little nervous about the evening hours here as some nasty storms are rolling through. I was reading some models saying this could be as bad as and when we had the storms roll through last March. When I don't know if I shared that, I think I did it on here. My property got absolutely wrecked. I lost 8, 9 mature trees, had my fence blown out, 2 barn roofs ripped off. Yeah, so I'm hopeful it doesn't happen again
I
tonight.
mean, hole in your shed too, man. Don't forget the
Hole
tree
in the
almost
shed.
came down and took you out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Then we
yeah.
need those
So
clones.
yeah, so for those who don't know, I was literally on a Zoom and I had a 80-year-old pine tree, fir actually, just outside my office, and storm snapped it in half at the top, and the tree came down, speared through my ceiling here, and missed me by a solid 3 feet. Um, I knew at that point my heart health was pretty good, because if it wasn't, I would have certainly had a heart attack.
Yeah, definitely, man. But yeah, same thing here though. It's right. It's a real nice rain here right now. Actually, like it's kind of nap time out here in the underneath this tin
Mm-hmm.
roof. I'm struggling a little bit,
Yeah.
but yeah. But it's gonna get rowdy this evening, and then I'll and then snow. So
Hmm. Yeah.
see what happens.
Same thing here. Rain on the tin roof, man, is really good for putting you to sleep. And I also got a big old belly full of a hot lunch right now I just had. So if I start dozing, you just got to run with it, man.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, I'll just start talking, and you can yell at me later if it was wrong.
Charles says was a Zoom call recorded. I don't think so.
Yeah.
I'll dig through my archives and see, but I don't think so. All right, cool. So let's dig in. We got a bunch of exciting topics to talk through today. And we'll kick things off. There's been a couple reports come out recently about cybersecurity funding studies that throughout 2023, and so the big headline right now is that, and I think this probably isn't a big surprise to anyone, but we saw a decrease in cybersecurity funding in 2023. So we wanted to talk through that a little bit. I think that the good news is, and when I'm looking at projections, that um, There's a lot of people predicting that those budgets will likely increase again in 2024. I think the result of those 2023 cuts were just the result of economic uncertainty. And so we saw people tighten up spending kind of across the board. But more so, I wanted to talk with you, Pinky, and see what do you think that cut in funding that we observed in 2023, how may that impact security programs and our entire world as we move forward?
Yeah, well, I'm not entirely sure we're not already seeing it, right? So we've talked over the last couple months about, breachmas and breach giving and, the 12 weeks of breachmas and that kind of thing. And,
Yeah.
you kind of think if things started getting cut back maybe at the beginning of last year, because most folks are doing their budgets at the beginning of the year. Um, if those cutbacks happen, maybe that's why we saw the large influx that we saw here at the end of the year. Um, it's kind of interesting though, like, you know, I think both of us are pretty much on the train of you kind of don't throw money at a problem, right? When it comes to
Mm-hmm.
security, it's not always, it's definitely not a one-to-one thing, right? You throw more money, things definitely get better. There's a lot to that. We see a lot of money get wasted and that kind of thing. So I'm hopeful that this is just people being mindful of their spending and spending it correctly,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to just buying the new. I'm going to sound like an old geezer, but the new whiz bang gadget that comes out this year that
Mm-hmm.
it's got all the AI and 10G and all the things, right? So I'm hopeful it's people just being more mindful of that and they can then focus in on the tools they do have and make those better and that kind of thing. That's my hopeful side. My
Mm-hmm.
realistic, pinky IR guy side says no, they're probably just killing tools and this is going to be a mess for late last year and on moving forward. So I'm a little bit concerned about it, to be honest with you. I mean, threats continue to evolve. The whole thing continues to evolve. So it could be a problem. It could be a huge
Yeah.
problem.
And, I share a similar sentiment there. One thing that I think about is we can say a lot of times when we go in and assess a client environment or responding to an incident or whatever we're doing, there is a high likelihood a lot of people just kind of have excessive tools, right? We've seen that where people did buy the shiny
Yeah.
new whiz bang and they rolled this tool out, but then it's not really utilized later. And that's, I mean, a pretty regular occurrence, right? Don't you see that often when you're working incidents? Like people have all these tools and they don't know what to do with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And so and the problem with that is not just so much that you've got a tool that you spent money on and you're not using it. It's that a lot of times they just roll the thing out and think, oh well, we're secure, right? It gives you that false sense of security. And then you find out when you have an incident, unfortunately, that oh, it wasn't recording the logs. I thought it was recording, or oh, it wasn't preventing this type of attack because we had it in monitor mode, or whatever the case may be. Because a lot of these tools roll out in a real bare bones fashion. A lot of times they'll be set to monitor only, or they'll be set to only log like the high value, the things that people consider high value, and we really need some slightly obscure log, a terminal services log, or something like that, that's probably
Mm-hmm.
not getting caught by that. And so we do see that a ton, and it's a big problem. I don't know that I want to go that route. I was going to say I'd almost rather people not buy the tools and not configure them, but it's neither of those are good options. So I don't
Right,
want to
right.
say that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if anything, this the cuts in budget is probably going to force people to reevaluate their security suite, their security stack. Um, and I'm hopeful too that, this is um kind of a natural progression where I think there was a huge increase in spending. Well, we know there was in like 2020, 2021,
Yeah.
through that time frame, really cranked up. There was a lot of, COVID hit, PPP money, all this stuff. So like budgets were really like injected with a big chunk of cash. And then I think people were like, holy crap, we're migrating into a new world, a new mode of operation for business that we don't know anything about. So let's throw all the tools at it. And this just could be like a natural breath, right? So like, we overexpanded those budgets for a couple years, and now we're normalizing those budgets to be like, hey, we bought a bunch of crap we didn't need. Let's focus on what's right for our security programs.
Yeah, I hope so. And I mean, that's a good assessment. I think you're probably closer to the truth on that than what we were, what I was thinking initially reading through that. And kind of like you say, security spending in particular is just highly reactive, right? Um, I think that article we were looking at even calls it out is that, most folks increase their spending dramatically after an incident.
Mm-hmm.
And while you should increase your security posture after an incident, whether that's more money or not, You know, unfortunately, that's not the best time to do it. The best time is to do it prior to the incident, so that you're either stopping that incident altogether, or you're at least mitigating the damage, providing more logging and that kind of thing for investigators to figure everything out and stuff like that. But I mean, that's just how humans behave, right? I mean, you and I are sitting here talking about the weather. There's going to be a bunch of people go out and buy a bunch of snow gear and things that they didn't have, and that's just how humans operate. A thing
Yeah.
happens, and we prepare for it after, almost a lot of times.
Yeah. We're very reactionary, and
Yeah.
we commonly have the mentality that this we're aware of the bad thing, but it's not going to happen to me, right? What are the
Yeah.
chances it's going to happen to me? And we see that mentality and throughout business as well. I can say too, another important thing is, regardless of like the motive behind this, or if this is a natural breath of our ecosphere, one thing is going to be for certain, and that is, I believe, that security professionals are going to have more scrutiny on their spend going forward, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think they've kind of had a blank check for the last few years. We've seen that. We've probably heard from people as well. Just, hey, yeah, I don't care what it costs, just make it happen, kind of thing. Because it's security, and security's the best. And we kind of love hearing that in a way. Just because it means you're at least able to take it seriously and you're getting the support you need. But I do agree. Like, we've been in you know, shakier economic times over the last few years, right? And so people are looking to cut where they can, and that kind of thing. My hope is that security is the sort of lowest, or one of the lowest items on that list to cut.
Mhm.
But it's going to have to see some pullback there, and like I said, just scrutiny. Just, hey, make sure
Mhm.
this shiny new toy you bought. Let's make sure it's set up correctly. And I think that's where the benefit actually may come from.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, like it's good for our listeners to think about, like, there's probably a lot of our listeners that are in this position where they're having to defend that budget or justify that budget as they move forward. And so, think about how you can really convey the value and the need for these tools through like data driven metrics. And what I mean by that is, like, we always talk about, we hate fear mongering here. And I think a lot of people take that approach of fear mongering when they're looking for the budget approval, like, well, we need this because if we have the incident, it's going to cost us this much money. While that may be true in theory, there's no data to prove that that incident would or would not have occurred. And so I think a lot of decision makers don't think in that headspace, right? They're more in the headspace of, show me data driven metrics and numbers to justify why I need these things in my environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be fair, if you can't pull the data and really show the value, then maybe it's not a tool you need. Maybe you need
Mm-hmm.
something else. Maybe you can do it with a solution you already have, or something like that, right? I'm never opposed to layers either. That's always good. But yeah, absolutely. Be able to show those kinds of things. If you've got an EDR tool or something like that, right, that's coming up for renewal, and go back and pull your data on that. How many things did this stop? How many things did this even see last year? Did it see a lot of stuff and potentially stop a lot of things? And you usually can pull that stuff down in an Excel doc or something like that and show, hey, here's some statistics. Here are 50 attacks that could have been really bad, but we were able to stop it because of this tool.
Yeah.
And I think it'll help a ton.
Yeah, and that's when I was in that space of, run cyber defense programs for enterprises. It was always very, very metric driven approach, right? So, for example, if we put in, a new email gateway, being able to statistically show, like, hey, here's how many emails we blocked in the last month compared to the previous months before this tool, and having those linear statistics, because people understand, like, oh, if we're blocking these malicious emails, that is preventing my user from possibly interacting like that. Executives can understand that sort of conversation, right? Other thing will be like tracking your number of events, like you mentioned with EDR. How many potential security events did we identify and stop because of our tooling or security stack we have today? Thinking about like your incident response timelines. Like, not only did we detect these things, right, but here's how our mean time to detection, here's our mean time to response. And I talk about that a lot, right? Mean time to detection is very important, but it's highly automated. And the mean time to respond is actually, to me, a more important metric than the mean time to detect. And so you have to show the efficiencies of your security teams through utilizing these data driven metrics.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that response is crucial, and we've talked about this a lot. If you're getting alerts, look at those alerts, use those alerts properly. There are a lot of incidents that we get in and we work and we say, hey, there was an alert a month ago that kind of tipped you off to this, but nobody saw it, nobody knew what to do with it, that kind of thing. So make sure you're understanding that, and then yeah, you can really show that value, especially as we kind of entered this spot where that dwell time from attackers has shrunk. It
Hmm.
used to be that we saw that it was at most or whatever 6 months or average of 6 months. And we always kind of laughed about that because that's absolutely just the cutoff date for logs, and that's the reason they're putting this data in here. But really, over the last little while, we've seen ransomware attacks go from taking a month or two or something to kind of from initial compromise to full ransom event to shrinking down to weeks, and
Hmm.
sometimes less depending on what the attackers are doing.
Hmm.
So that's huge. Yeah, that's big. Did have a interesting question pop up here, unless you've got something else to say on that.
No, I was just about to read the question, so go ahead.
Yeah, I'll read it out. I'm curious what you have to say about this though. So it's an anonymous attendee said, "What do you think of the saying that some have been throwing around? If you cannot afford security, you cannot afford a breach."
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I haven't heard that saying before.
Yeah.
It is really interesting. And it's a tough situation for people to be in because I understand, and like we're talking about right here, big business slashing budget, but there's also the flip side where you have these small to medium businesses that aren't generating enough revenue so they can actually invest into that security program yet, right? And so yeah, it's I think technically that's true. If you can't afford security, you can't afford a breach because we also know that small to medium business has a low chance of survival if they have a serious security incident. That being said, too, I don't think that security always relates to money. We talk about that, and so there's so many things that you can do without spending another dollar. While it may take resource time, right? So it's my from my angle, it would be to approach this with understanding the utilization of my resources I have today. And do I have resources that I can focus and put on a path to learn and be able to implement security solutions? And so I don't think that like not having budget is really a valid excuse to not have a security program.
Yeah, yeah, and excuse me, I love that answer. My hunch is this is coming from vendors, because that's a very vendor sales guy kind of thing to
Mhm.
say.
Yeah.
And it's not my favorite. I'll be honest, it's kind of a jerk thing to say to somebody because they are obviously in a tough position, um, and you're trying to get them to buy a tool.
Mhm. And
So yeah,
probably a tool you don't need.
no, exactly right. That's why they're having trouble selling it to you. But yeah, I agree with your assessment on that 100%. I mean, if you have an Active Directory domain, you have security tools. If you
Hmm.
have a Windows system in your environment or a Linux system, you have security tools already built in.
Hmm.
They may not be super fancy, but you have logging. You have extra logging you can turn on. You have ways to programmatically look through those, right? I mean, like Oscar said, this may take some time and some work, but it may not be so much on the money side, right? Obviously, resource time is a consideration there, and most of the shops we're talking about that are in this position are going to be small shops. They're going to have pretty small IT teams. You're probably, if this is you, you're probably one of one or two at best,
Hmm.
and your time is extremely stretched. But do what you can, right? Pull down the log files, at least have those. Maybe check out some DFIR type resources on common things to look for, right? Very common one that we see a lot: system event logs. Every Windows system gathers system event logs, and if a service gets installed on those, it gets recorded as an event ID 7045, right? And there's usually not a ton of those per system. So let's say you've got 5 systems in your environment. Pull down that security log once a week.
Hmm.
Look through that. Look for weird systems. Like that's one thing you can do to
Hmm.
help prevent that. And so that's just one very specific example, but it's that type of thing I'm talking about.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I did want to kind of step back to kind of thinking about like defending these security budgets and selling those security budgets to your decision makers. Another thought process too is I think a lot of people think of this as almost like a sunk cost, right? Something that they put money into, but you don't really see return from that. But like, can we shift that mentality a little bit? Because there is an opportunity. And you think about like what are thought leaders or what are your business leaders? What's top of mind for them in most businesses? It's money, right? It's money. How do we impact our bottom line at the end of the day? And I can tell you from experiences I've worked through from security-driven initiatives, like for example, I worked at a large corporation, and as we were essentially building an enterprise capability for vulnerability management, one task we had to do is, build our inventory, right? So we start building this massive inventory. I was in an environment at that time, we had 115,000-ish internal systems, 15 to 16,000 external systems that would revolve, based upon business at that time. But through that exercise and going through the inventory process, we also had to inventory our circuits, right? So we understand what public IP space do we own, where our circuits, and build that into our vulnerability management program. So doing this exercise, and this is almost, it kind of makes me sick when I really talk about it, but we discovered a very high volume of circuits that this Fortune 500 company was paying for that were actually never utilized, right? And to the tune of over $1 million a year. So they were spending over $1 million a year for connectivity that was never used, wasn't in use. I don't know how it got to this situation, but it was completely dormant. And so this investment in security, right, and building this enterprise capability actually resulted in a significant return of funds to that organization. Other opportunities or similar things are like, we just talked about that, like going through an inventory system as part of an assessment, a security assessment, to determine what tools are in place. You're probably going to determine a lot of time you have things in place maybe you're not utilizing anymore, doesn't really fit your organization, isn't a need for your organization, and so you're actually able to get money back into the organization. And so that's something I don't think a lot of decision makers think about. So as a security expert, you can explain that, right? This opportunity to go through this because there may be a positive return because of an investment into security.
Yeah, absolutely. And should be. Yeah, I'm also just amused because I'm obviously aware of that company, and I think we've got some other folks on the call that are aware of that company, so it's not a shocker to us, right?
Right.
But it's also, that's a huge thing, right? That's $1 million that you could put back into security, right there, from something that was completely useless. So,
yeah, 100%. So yeah, I don't know if we have anything else to say about that, but yeah, hopefully give you guys some good information so that you can be armed when you have those conversations and you're trying to defend your security budgets, or even shifting that perspective about that investment and why that investment is important. So I feel like, and it happens every podcast because Patch Tuesday is always on the Tuesday we're doing the Hackle Box
second Friday, yeah.
But probably just a little PSA to everybody. So Microsoft Patch Tuesday was this week. There were 49 vulnerabilities, I think, that were remediated, but two big ones in there. So there were two critical CVEs that were released. I don't know. I think one was a 9. I don't know what the other one was, if it was a 10 or not. But essentially, another Kerberos vulnerability, right? So Kerberos for everybody is just the default authorization technology that's utilized in Microsoft. It's not new that Kerberos is being attacked or there's a discovered vulnerability with Kerberos. Kerberosting is a big thing. Golden tickets, silver tickets, diamond tickets. So this is probably just another vector that attackers will continue to use to identify new vectors to abuse Kerberos.
Yeah, and this one did get a 9. I'm with you. I didn't get the CVSS on the other one, so I'm not sure where that's at. But this one is a 9. So it's CVE 2024-20674 is the one we're speaking about in particular here. The important thing to remember, this does still require access to the network already. So this isn't a, externally, well, if you've got external systems that are vulnerable to this, that is a problem, right? But yeah, it's essentially a man in the middle or a machine in the middle type attack where, and these aren't new either, this type of method, even with Kerberos, but it's basically sends a malicious Kerberos message to like the client, the victim machine, and then it spoofs itself as the Kerberos authentication server, like the domain controller, that type of thing, right? And so when it answers back, it's getting in the middle of that conversation there. But yeah, it does require access to the network already, so keep that in mind. Definitely get it patched quickly because, as much as we don't like to think about it, getting into your network initially is not the most difficult thing often, especially some of the other things we're going to talk about today. But yeah.
I would say this would be a patch I'd recommend. Get it on your next patch cycle. I don't know that this would really warrant an out-of-band patch because, like Pinky said, it's going to require that internal access. If you do have an attacker on your network with that access already, you probably have other avenues that they are already utilizing. And so we have bigger problems we have to worry about. The other critical vulnerability was in Windows Hyper-V, and this was essentially discovered as a race condition. So a race condition is just essentially a logic flaw, and race conditions can oftentimes allow access to a shared data source via like parallel processing or threads or whatever, right? So essentially they can gain access to a data source, a piece of memory or whatever that you shouldn't be able to have access to. And this one, from what I understand, is just going to give that possibility of compromising a Hyper-V environment, allowing remote code execution, so the attackers may be able to manipulate those systems or gain access to those systems or maintain persistent access in the Hyper-V environment.
Yeah, it looks like that one was either a 7.5 or a 6.5 on the
Okay.
CVSS score. What
Yeah,
I'm
so it
seeing here.
wasn't a critical. I guess that would be a high then. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's I still don't see a ton of the Hyper-V out there. I know it's in use, and
Mhm.
plenty of folks use it and love it, and good for them. I mean, that's great because it's kind of already paying for it. But I still don't see a ton of it out there. But either way, if you are utilizing Hyper-V, that's a good one to get patched.
Yep.
It's weird. It still shows it as a critical, even though it's 7.5 or 6.5. It's just
Yeah.
weird.
Interesting.
So yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Well, all right. Everybody get your Windows systems patched. The big thing right now, like we kind of threw on here last minute too, is talking about the Avanti VPN attacks. Um, so there was a couple critical CVEs released for Avanti, CVE 2023-46805 and 21887. That's impacting the Avanti Connect Secure VPN, like also known as CS, right? And it was formerly Pulse Secure. But it's, from what I understand, so it's a flaw in the integrity checker function in that VPN device, and it's being actively exploited today.
Yeah, yeah. And so if we remember just last year, there was a huge Pulse VPN vulnerability. I'm assuming this is why they had a name change, because we often see that happen. But yeah, it looks like has the ability to place web shells on internal and external facing web servers. That's huge because those aren't always easily detectable, and that's been a real big theme for what 2 years now. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
always been a thing, but they've really been hitting the web shell based attacks recently because everything has a web management portal or something now, so it's a good avenue.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, if you are vulnerable to this one, as always, if you've been, I mean, you have been vulnerable. If you have this, patch and threat hunt, right? Always threat hunt with these types of things because they are being, like Oscar said, they are being actively exploited. You may have web shells sitting out there, and that patch is not going to fix those web shells.
Yeah, exactly. I think there are some folks putting out IOCs right now, so I would urge everybody, if you have that device, familiarize yourself with those IOCs so you can check your device. Obviously, we always say if you need some help, holler at us or holler at somebody
Yeah.
to walk through that process. The big thing with this one too is patches aren't out yet, so this is an unpatched vulnerability. I was looking at the patch release dates, and they're supposed to start today, depending upon the device, but it's going to roll through like it's going to take them 5 weeks to get all the devices fully patched. Um, but they have released mitigating controls. So I don't know if you've seen that, but there's an XML file essentially that you can download from Avanti and apply that XML file to your device, and it's supposed to mitigate the attack. But I know we've seen this before, right, Pink? Like a lot of times when this core vulnerability is discovered, we see vendors release mitigation, and then it gets compromised again, and they keep updating the mitigating controls over and over and over. And so I would apply that. I'm not urging people to not do that. You should certainly apply those mitigating factors, but don't think you're done. I would keep a close eye on this and pay attention to news. And there is a possibility those mitigating controls will be evaded.
Yeah, I mean, Proxy Shell Infinity, that was a great example of that. They would
Mm-hmm.
mitigations, and then they would bypass those mitigations, bypass those patch, bypass the patch. One thing I don't know, this may have been updated since you looked at it, Oscar, but it looks like now the patches are not available until the week of January 22nd. So I
Oh,
guess
wow.
next week, yeah. And it said even then they're going to stagger them,
Mm-hmm.
like you were saying on the product version. So
Okay. Yeah, when I checked this morning, there was a list of devices that were scheduled for today, but I guess they couldn't meet that deadline, unfortunately.
yeah, and it could just be conflicting information, right? I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
see that a lot too. That's always the challenge with these things. These new vulnerabilities come out, and there's always conflicting information. So
Mm-hmm.
either way, mitigations, threat hunt, and patch when they're available, and then
Mm-hmm.
probably threat hunt again.
Yep.
So
Yep. All right, cool. So you remember the Quackbot takedown, right, Pinky?
I do. It's a happy day.
Yeah, happy day for all. Although Blackbot is still active.
Yeah, it was a happy day with extreme caveats. So
Yeah, yeah,
I remember reading that. I was like, oh, that's good. That's not going to last.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
It reminds me. So I watched. There's a Netflix documentary called Cyberbunker. Have you seen this yet?
I haven't. No.
It's okay. I mean, it's worth a watch. It's mostly subtitled, so if that's not your jam, you probably
Mm,
want to skip it. Um, but it's the story of um, a group of individuals who created a business called Cyberbunker, and I think originally it was in um, Holland, and something happened, he got shot down there. So this guy bought another bunker in a small town in Germany, and so they were essentially a web hosting, business or server hosting. You buy a server from them, do whatever you want, right? And the whole thing was like, um, you have complete privacy. We're not going to investigate your servers. We don't care what you do, and we'll guarantee uptime all the time. Systems in place to ensure these servers will continue to run. And obviously it's in a bunker, so it's going to be pretty safe, right, from natural disaster and all those things. But the long or the short here, I'm getting long-winded, is they essentially arrested all these guys for creating a criminal enterprise. And they were hosting like lots of, dark web stuff where people were
Yeah.
selling illegal goods and services, all sorts of things that are illegal, but their defense was like, hey, we don't know what's going on. Right. We
Yeah.
just sell people a server. They do with what they want. We're not here to enforce laws. We're here to provide a service. And so there was multiple charges. They were only able to convict them on creating a criminal enterprise. I think they were trying to convict them on other things like aiding and embedding criminal operations, but they couldn't prove that. But it really reminds me of the same thing here we see all the time. Like it was celebrated when they were able to arrest these guys and shut this down as like a huge, huge victory in cyber warfare, right? And they were able to,
Yeah.
go through this exercise. But at the end of the day, what happened? We know what happened, right? They didn't stop anyone. They found a new hosting provider.
Yeah. They just went to
And
DigitalOcean.
yeah, just went to DO, stood the same things up again. And it also like really like made me think, right? And so if we can hold someone liable for the data that they're hosting on their servers when or they're someone is paying them to host, right? If you can be held liable, then how is Amazon not a criminal?
It's yeah.
How is
So
Microsoft not being prosecuted for being a criminal?
it's sort of the platform laws we have here
Mhm.
is how that works, right? So it's the same thing like Facebook,
Right.
Twitter / X, all that kind of thing, right?
Mhm.
We do have laws here for that. This is a kind of a political discussion that I don't want to rile
Mhm.
people in the chat up about because there's heated feelings on both sides of that.
Right, right.
But yeah, it's kind of that. But I mean I'm with you, right? I mean at least from an international perspective, if if Amazon is operating things that are then attacking internationally, or they're hosting things that are attacking internationally, it seems like it's a really gray area.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's also though. I mean, just completely off the path here, but I love that they were in a bunker. Like they had a bunker, then they bought a new one. That's great. I mean, that's
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I mean, if you're gonna go with the name, you might as well go all in.
Right.
But yeah, they're yeah, it is interesting. Like I mean, DigitalOcean's a great example of that, right? I mean, there are good things on DigitalOcean, I'm sure. Legitimate people hosting things, and they're probably doing fine. But man, every time I see a DigitalOcean IP in an investigation, that's an immediate, like, huge red flag. Like, oh, hey,
Yeah.
here's probably our attacker.
Right, right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm not going to tell who or the story, but a friend who got banned from DigitalOcean, and I'm like,
Yeah.
how in the hell did you pull that off, man?
Right. Like, what did you do?
Yeah,
What in the world did you
right.
do to get banned from DigitalOcean? Yeah. I mean, you and I know we've stood up things that look pretty nefarious in DigitalOcean, just
Yeah,
testing and that kind of thing. They don't care. They're just like,
no,
oh, whatever. I don't care, man.
yeah,
Do
it's
what
the
you gotta do. You
Wild
gonna give us our
West.
money? Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And it's so funny too, whenever we're doing an investigation, right, and we're doing research on an IP, instantly when we find something that's hosted in DigitalOcean, we assume it's malicious.
Yeah, every time. I'm gonna always assume that, right? There are a couple of those. There's DigitalOcean. There's a couple I can't think of right off the top of my head, but there are a few that I'm just like, oh, yeah,
Mhm.
that's probably bad. So
Right.
yeah, if you see DigitalOcean IPs in your firewall logs and that kind of thing, or your local system logs, just proceed with extreme caution.
For sure.
So,
For sure. So I
but
went way off base
yeah,
there.
it's okay. That's good.
But yeah, so remember the Quackbot takedown? We talked about that. So now we got Pikabot, right? Pikabot. Have you guys heard about Pikabot?
Pikabot. It's a weird name. I'm curious how they got that, but Yeah,
I
it's
think they're just big Pokemon fans.
I think that's what it is. Yeah, it could be.
Yeah,
Could be. Yeah,
yeah,
I didn't put that together. Good job.
yeah.
Um, yeah, so this is from some old friends too.
Mhm,
Some folks that we were aware of. The Black Basta or Black Basta ransomware sort of group. It's a little
mhm,
fuzzy on if they're a group or what they've got going on there, but yeah, from them, supposed to be the Quackpot successor. We'll see, right? I
mhm.
mean, I'm curious if it's as evasive and as modular. You know, Quackbot was around from it's either 2008 or 2014. I can never remember which one. I think TrickBot is one of those, and Quackbot's
I
the
think
other,
Quackbot's the older, yeah,
the older.
2008, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, so a long time. It survived and still technically survives. So yeah, I'm curious if that works out to be more of a concern. Um, the big thing that hit me when we are talking about this, though, so I don't know if I assume the Unsecurity podcast is not out yet from yesterday because we
It's
just
not,
recorded it
yeah.
yesterday. Yeah. So for anybody that listens to both, ignore some of the things I say there about email because they completely shifted one day later. Um, so we talked a bit on there about thread jacking or conversation like hijacking attacks, and so we've seen a ton of those particularly over the last 3 months or so. And this is where an attacker compromises somebody on one end of the conversation. They grab that email chain and then reply back to it so that it adds some legitimacy to that. So it's like, oh, this is a reply I'm already involved in. I'll click the links that are in it. I'll do the thing it says. Um, so yesterday we talked about this, and I talked about how that in general when we see these, it's financially motivated. It's like electronic funds transfers. They're trying to get in the middle of a transfer like that, so they'll
Mhm.
change the bank account number on an invoice or something like that. That's pretty much all we ever see in those is that type of an attack. Um, Turns out that the Pikabot is utilizing that technique to then attach the malware to the email.
Mhm.
So this is going to look like a PDF or a doc or an Excel document, something like that, an image, something that's going to seem pretty innocuous to you, and now you've got this legitimacy of that email chain. And so be very aware of that. I mean, this is a huge concern. I sent messages to my team while I was researching this. I'm like, hey, any of these cases we have active that had conversation jacking, let's go take another look at them. Let's take a deeper look on that email chain. We do
Mhm.
that anyway, but let's take one more look just because this is a new thing that maybe
Right.
isn't showing up as easily.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, they are utilizing thread jacking, which is very common, right? We see that
Yeah.
all the time in other cases that we work. A couple like key things like this is the loader and the core module of Pikabot is actually Quackbot. It's the same, right? So they've just retooled this. I think the only difference is this does include shellcode that'll deliver a malicious DLL as well, and then that shellcode and DLL is essentially used then to be a loader or a cradle to go get C2, right? And so kind of a shift from what we've been talking about here. These guys are utilizing Cobalt Strike. We've seen a lot of attackers kind of go away from that and start utilizing, we've talked about before, remote access and remote administration tools because your EDR doesn't find them. And so it's kind of interesting to me that they are embedding Cobalt Strike back into this attack chain. And so I'm curious if we're going to see an uptick in those techniques again next year because I think everybody's getting better at identifying remote admin software. It's not supposed to be there. So as the way of the world, what's old is new again. And I think maybe this is a sign that we're going to see another shift.
This was one of the things I was actually kind of excited about with this, right? Because we kind of have gotten pretty good at
Mhm.
catching Cobalt Strike. I know our team and really security teams as a whole have gotten much better at catching Cobalt Strike. Now there are some new methods and some new ways that they're deploying Cobalt Strike that makes it a little shiftier, but overall it's something we're familiar with. So I'm glad to see a little familiarity there.
Mhm.
The fact that it does have some Quackbot on the back end too is a little bit helpful as well because we're used to seeing that as well. So I'm
Mhm.
curious if it has the same replication spread mechanisms and that kind of thing, because that should be easier for us to detect.
Mhm.
But yeah, the Cobalt Strike. Now I do think we probably still see the remote management tools deployed. It's probably just going to be the combination of Cobalt Strike plus remote management tools, and we saw that for a brief period of time year or two ago when they first started using a lot of the, Screen Connect and things like that. We would often see Cobalt Strike come along with those, or Cobalt Strike and then those, that kind of thing. So,
Mhm.
Yeah, like you're saying, this is hopefully a familiar pattern for us, and it won't be as difficult to detect. But yeah, there were a bunch of, I think it was like 70 or something C2 domains they found, and a bunch of Cobalt
Yeah.
Strike clusters.
Yeah.
So hopefully those get, you know, put on block lists and stuff pretty quick as well. But as always, too, it doesn't attack systems that have a core language of Russian or Ukrainian. So you can kind of get a picture of maybe where this is coming from that, which
Mhm.
makes sense. We knew that the Black Basta folks were there.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing a sample. I mean, I don't want to see a sample from an incident. I'd like to look at a sample outside of an incident. I hope nobody gets hit with it, but
Yeah. Yeah.
curious if it's as familiar as it seems like it might be.
Yeah. Malware Bazaar, man. Check it out. Hopefully it's up
Yeah,
there. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a resource if you guys don't know. If you just ever want to play with some malware, check out Malware Bazaar. Be careful,
Please be
because
careful.
it
Yeah,
is legit malware.
yeah.
Yeah, so like Pinky had mentioned too, in this case, I think the research at this point, it's always been a PDF or an IMG file. I expect, like you mentioned, like it's going to be applied to Excel files, Word docs, all this same
Mhm.
typical methods that we see in these types of attacks. What's really interesting to me is that we've seen this like increase in Pikabot, like you've talked about. We work cases with the Black Basta group, or I've heard them called water Curupira.
Yeah, I couldn't pronounce that. I'm glad you said it.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know what a Curupira is. A Curupira is, however, um, interesting name. But so, in conjunction with this, it was also announced this week as well that SR Labs, which is a German researcher, released a decryptor for the Black Basta ransomware. Did you see that?
I did. I'm sorry. I'm on Wikipedia now because I had to figure out what this was. It looks like it's a mythological creature from a certain set of myths that I'm not going to be able to pronounce, but it's from the Amazon rainforest of Brazil. So
Mm.
there you go. I'm not gonna spend all day on this because I'll leave it up for later to read. But yeah, I did see that they released a decryptor, so that's good news for
It
folks who've.
protects, man. It protects forest and animals from hunters. That's what the
Oh, okay.
Curupira
Well, see,
does.
yeah, this is what
Yeah,
happens. He's
yeah,
talking, so I'm looking at the thing in the background. I'm talking, so he's looking at it. Curious minds, we got to know. But
I'm just gonna throw the word in chat so everybody knows how to spell it, and
yeah,
I'm sure everybody else is gonna Google this today too.
man, I'm getting ready to derail a little bit here, but
That's all right.
this is actually kind of a useful exercise. So this is something that I don't think a lot of folks think about is when you see the name of a piece of malware or an attack group or something. Now, it's better if it's the name they go by as opposed to like the name that some Caesar or somebody's assigning to them.
Mm-hmm.
Can be helpful, but you can often get some insights into how they think, right? Like, so we know that they like fairies or whatever, or mythological creatures. So then we start thinking, okay, if something else pops up that fits that pattern by name or something like that, it's not a lot, but it can be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, back on topic. It looks like the decryptor is really for one campaign. I saw it said two, but it never gave the second name,
Mm-hmm.
at least that I could tell. And so that was the tortilla campaign. Um, and then that's around a bunch of different variants of the same ransomware as well. So keep that in mind. You may have gotten something you didn't know was Black Basta. Like I know we saw a case where I was looking at the ransom note. I was like, that's what this is, but they never claimed to be that group, or there were no other references to that, and so it's likely one of the
Mm-hmm.
sort of subvariants of it. But it apparently decrypts all of that, so that's great if you've got some servers that you still need to decrypt or whatever. Obviously, if you're going to do that, be very, very careful because there's a decent chance there's malware in there as well, right? So be super careful with the data that you're pulling back. Do this all on an isolated network until you're actually just never bring that server back on your network. Get the data off and
Yeah.
bring it over a different way. But yeah, I thought that's great. I love to see when these decryptors come out. The thing that worries me is that we're seeing this rise of like Pikabot. We know that's the same group. Folks may not be as responsive to that. Be like, hey, there's a decryptor out there. We're fine. Even if we get hit, it's not that big of a
Yeah.
deal.
Sure. Sure.
But that decryptor is likely not going to work on this new campaign. Or,
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. They will. There will a new variant, and the encryptor will no longer be effective. I'm sure of that. Um,
yeah,
Another key thing too about this decryptor is you have to have information about the data in the file. So you can only decrypt or identify that decryption code if you have the plain text of 64 encrypted bytes. And it only works too on files that are 5,000 bytes or above. Um, Oh, I'm sorry. I meant to throw that in the main
That's okay.
chat.
Gotcha.
But yeah, so to have even a successful recovery, you still have to know plain text data that exists in that file so it can correlate and identify. And essentially, it's just, I'm assuming, cracking that
Yeah.
decryption key to be able to get your files back.
Yeah, because just from what I gathered, it sounds like very likely the like CISA and FBI and those folks. Because I know when we were looking at attacks from this group, they were very interested. You know, those government groups are very interested of, hey, did you get a decryptor? Did you, do you have any samples? That kind of thing.
Hmm.
So I'm guessing they got part of the decryption certificate, the SSO, the token essentially for that, and then it probably needs that text to kind of figure that out, figure out what it actually
Hmm.
what it
Yeah.
actually is using.
Yep.
So
Also, to just another PSA for everybody, there was a decryptor released for Babook Tortilla, and
that's the same
so
thing. That's
it
this.
is so
As
Babook.
far as I could tell, anyway.
No, I think they're
Are they
different.
different?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so
yeah.
my bad on that. Yeah,
Yeah. And I said tortilla. That's hilarious. I said
tortilla. Did you
tortilla.
actually say tortilla?
I did say because I say quesadilla. It's like one of those words I've always used because it was funny. It was like in Napoleon Dynamite, right? We're that generation, like, oh, a play on quesadilla, and now it's like I can't say quesadilla properly anymore. I think my brain is just trained to say quesadilla.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. I was looking back to this article. I believe you are correct. There's one for black pasta and the tortilla group, which
Yeah,
is
you
we've
thought
not
about it,
run that.
right? You almost said tortilla,
I
didn't you?
did. Did you hear the
Yeah.
pause? Yeah, I had to
Uh-huh.
stop there.
Yeah,
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 but yeah, it's yeah. So it looks like it's hopefully both. So that's
yeah.
great.
Yep. Well, cool too. And maybe just to circle back to we're talking about Pikabot and those methods of delivering Pikabot. So takeaways from that, I think it's like we always say for people, don't open files you're not expecting. If you receive an email with an attachment, then you weren't expecting that. Don't open that. If you have questions about it, reach out to the individual that sent you that and say, is this legitimate? I do that all the time still today with lots of valid things where something will come through I'm not expecting. I pick up the phone and I'll give someone a ring. It happened with a friend of mine yesterday. He randomly sends me an email about, some sort of form that, he would like me to fill out. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not clicking that. And then call him later, like, should I expect this? He's like 100%. Sorry, I didn't let you know beforehand, but just do a little diligence there. Make sure you're validating those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's huge. And then, as always, I mean, this is still a pretty basic one, but it goes along with some of the email attacks that we talked about on security as well. But if you've got a link or something that looks like an attachment or whatever in an email, hover over that. Get your finger off the clicker button,
Mm-hmm.
but hover your mouse over that. You don't want to twitch and accidentally click it. But yeah, hover over that. Make sure that link looks legitimate. And even still, right? Don't throw away your caution because they may be hosting this on a OneDrive or a OneNote or Google Drive, something that you would kind of expect them to use, and you can't always tell what sort of tenant or what account you're going to from that link. But hover over that. If it says garbagehackershq.net.io or something like that, definitely don't
Smash,
click that one.
smash it. Click the smash, smash it.
just click that link
Yeah.
immediately and then call us. But no, yeah, yeah. Look out for those things. It's not always obvious, right? I mean, there's a lot of lookalike domains and things like that too. So be
Mhm.
careful with that. But that is one simple thing to just
Mhm.
teach your users to do
Yeah,
and be aware of.
for sure. And verify the sender too, right? Because a
Yeah,
lot of these
absolutely.
cases we're seeing they're actually using a spoofed email address to deliver this. So verify your sender as expected as part of that process.
Yeah, that's been I mean, just we've got time here, so that's been an interesting one too. Is some of these conversation hijacking attacks we've seen in the past, they were just going to use the compromised user to send that email back. That still happens, but they've shifted a lot to lookalike domains and lookalike accounts and that kind of thing, and then they're sending it from an external source as well. So it's a little bit of an evasion tactic, but it can work in your favor, right? So if you're
Mhm.
really paying attention to that email address or whatever, and you see that instead of FRSecure, it's like F-Secure, which F-Secure's a company as well, but
Mhm.
it's FK Secure or something like that. Can help you catch that kind of thing. But
Mhm.
yeah, that's been a weird shift, and I'm not
Yeah, I
certain I
see
fully
two
understand it.
possible two possible reasons why for me,
Yeah.
right? Number one is it was a previously compromised account. and they've
Yeah.
now secured that account. However, we talk about they didn't properly investigate that mailbox, and so the attacker was likely offloading messages to another account that's undiscovered, and so they're still getting access to the inbox. However, it's through offloading, right? And forwarding those messages over. So that would be one reason I see. The other would be too, and it's just like you said, defense evasion. Perhaps they have a higher likelihood of being undiscovered if they're not sending those messages from that company infrastructure, so they can keep that separate and do the spoofing and make a lookalike that's believable and evade any detection systems the enterprise or the business may have in place.
Yeah, definitely on that one. And it's been a little bit of a mix. I was kind of thinking as you were talking about the previously compromised accounts, it's been a little bit of a mix of like how quickly they're doing this. Some of them we've seen it be a little farther out, so maybe exactly that compromised account, they changed the password, moved on. Um, the other though, we've seen them be pretty fast about it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's in those cases, it's usually that they've kind of been setting up for this. They've probably been in that account for a while, and they're like, okay, we're gonna stand up the lookalike domain, wait for the invoice that we want to target, right? Let's try to find somebody who maybe seems like they're not going to pay as much attention, or the right amount of money that's not going to either going to be just enough for us to be happy about getting that money, or isn't going to set off alarm bells, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah.
Cool. Well, I think that just about does it for us today, unless there's anything else you wanted to talk about, Pink.
No, I mean, I guess since it's public info, right? That you're moving
Yeah.
up in the world. Yeah. So yeah, congrats to Oscar, everybody. He's El Presidente now, as somebody put in the chat a minute ago. So
Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah, thanks, man. I really appreciate that. I'm so excited about the opportunity and just really looking forward to all the great things we're going to be able to do this year and the years to come. And honestly, I pinch myself every day because I can't believe I have the opportunity to be in this position. Not only am I lucky enough to work with the best damn people in the world, and I truly mean that, I also get to be part of the best damn mission in the world and really influence our direction. And yeah, I'm excited. So thanks, man.
You gonna start wearing suits now, though? Is that gonna happen?
You know the answer to that
Yeah, I
question.
do. I do. Yeah, that's why I asked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'll tell this story. Like it's fine. Before I worked here, like I did work in a corporate world, and I worked for some banks and all these different places. And from time to time, I'd have to wear a jacket and a suit and ties and all that fun stuff. And so when I first started here at FRSecure, when I got the job here, legit, I just threw away all my ties. I was like, I'm never wearing these again, and threw them in the trash. And so the only time you'll see me in a suit and ties when I'm dead, and hopefully that's a long way away.
Oh man, yeah, definitely, I agree. But yeah, maybe a tuxedo T-shirt though. I mean,
Oh, a
just to keep
tuxedo
it,
t-shirt all
it
day,
in the middle, right? I mean, you're
Yeah,
kind of formal, but you're here to party, right? So
yeah.
they got some more movie references there. But
All right. Well, yeah, thanks, man. And thanks to all our listeners. Appreciate you guys. Happy New Year to everyone. I hope you guys had a nice holiday and got a little bit of time to relax and refresh. And I hope your year is off to an excellent start. And I wish everybody a great year this year. Let's go get it and make 2024 pretty awesome. What do you say, Pink?
sounds good to me, man. I'm all for it. Let's kick its ass.
Hell yeah. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. We'll see you in a month.
All right, buddy.